Hey everybody. So you've completed your first screenplay and you spent all your time working on the dialogue, getting the beats down perfectly. You are 100% certain that this is the screenplay you're gonna shoot. So what do? What's the next step? I want to talk about breaking down a script, which is essentially the process of going through the script scene by scene and marking each individual item that might appear on the screen as it's written on the script. That could be anything from the glasses your person's wearing, or a car that passes by in the background, or a sound that you hear. Any of those type of things that are in your script, you have to have a list of them so that you make sure when you're ready to shoot, you have those pieces there. This goes back to the last video where I talked about making sure you have all of the pieces that you need to execute the script properly. So let's take a look here. I have a script that I wrote, and for those of you who are rock and roll fans, you'll notice that this particular scene that I've written here is actually the lyrics to the Queen song, Another One Bites the Dust. This is not by any means extensive, so I'm just going to give you the basic idea of how this works, and then you can experiment from there. So you can see that I have here Final Draft 10. It is the industry standard. Now, this is not to say that you have to have this software. The particular method that I'm going to feature here is in Final Draft, but I will show a couple of other ways that you can do this. If you wrote your screenplay in Microsoft Word or Google Docs, that's fine too. It's the technique, not the software that we're talking about. So what I'm going to do is save this screenplay. Now with Final Draft, you get a separate utility. It's called Tagger 2 actually. And this is meant for the process of breaking down your script. So what you would do is open your file in this software, and there it is. It brings in your screenplay into the software, in this case, one particular scene that we're gonna do. It already pre-notes that there is an exterior, a street, and it's daytime. Now you can also see over here that it took the name Steve. Now it's just coincidence that I use the name Steve here because the song uses the name Steve, and they may or may not have been talking about me in a former life. So we can see here that Steve walks warily down the street. So we know already that we have Steve, that's our character, and we have a street with a brim pulled way down low. Now, we know that with a brim, we're talking about a hat. So if we select brim in this particular case, we know that that's going to be under costume. So we'll add that element. A brim falls under costume. Okay, done. Ain't no sound but the sound of his feet. Well, we know that the sound of his feet are generally footsteps. So we want that to be under sound. We'll add that. As we keep going here, it says machine guns ready to go. Now, I'm going to assume in this case it says machine guns plural. I copied and pasted this off the internet. It sounds to me like it says machine gun is ready to go, machine guns ready to go, apostrophe S. It's not in this particular case, so we'll assume that that machine gun is a prop that Steve is warily carrying down the street. So we'll put that under props. We'll add that element, machine gun, prop, there it is, done. Now Steve has some dialogue here. Are you ready? Hey, are you ready for this? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? And then out of the doorway, the bullets rip. So now we know that there's a doorway, so that's going to be something that we'll have to keep track of for our location. We can actually make a note of that. Add it, doorway, note. That way when we go location scouting, we're looking for our street, we got to have a doorway. And we see here that the bullets rip. Now, this is a directorial question. Do we actually see him firing the gun? It says here the bullets rip to the sound of the beat. Let's assume at this particular case that we're going to have some sort of either mechanical or special effects. We're going to call it a special effect. We're going to add that to our list. And now we have bullets. So let's assume that that machine gun is going to fire on camera, so we're going to need to see our muzzle flash. We're potentially going to see bullet strikes in the street, the cars, who knows. And then it says to the sound of the beat. So at that point we know that there must be some sort of beat going on, either music inside the scene coming from a car that's passing on the street, or the music that we hear from the orchestra playing over the top of this. In this case, it doesn't really matter, but we'll put that under music. And now you can see it color-coded everything that's on here. Now all of these elements will be sorted into their own category, and when you do a full feature-length script, this becomes exceptionally long, but it does sort them by scene, which is very important because one scene in a movie might be Steve walking warily down the street, but the very next scene, we might cut from there to the police dispatcher. We know that we're not going to need the machine gun in the police station. It does sort those each by the scene, and in an upcoming video, I'll show you how scheduling begins, and that's when those things become very important. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to use this particular software. As you can see here, I have it in Microsoft Word. Now it's the same process, it's just a little bit different. If you're doing this for the very first time, this is a great way to experiment. Also, I want to note I did not set these up to exact margins, although they are pretty close. So you could do that if you want. There are a number of websites out there that will give you the margins, and even more books probably that have what the margins are, the preferred margins for a Hollywood screenplay. I suggest you use that if you ever want to submit your screenplay to someone to read, because if it's all over the place, they're going to throw it in the trash and probably not take your call anymore. So when I was first learning how to do this, I used a great book called Film Scheduling by Ralph Singleton, and in it he goes through the entire process of breaking down the script and scheduling the movie The Conversation by Francis Ford Coppola. If you haven't seen that movie, you should probably hit pause now, watch that, come back, because that in itself is its own film school. This book is more or less the standard, as far as I know. Nobody's ever told me differently, for breaking down and scheduling. He uses different colors than what were represented in Final Draft's Tagger. You can use the link below to download a script breakdown sheet. It's 1 page per scene in your script. I included the colors that Singleton uses, not Final Draft. That is totally up to you. You can make your own entire color structure if you want. Just make sure you do a color key at the beginning so that if you hand it off to somebody, they're not trying to figure out what you're talking about. They might think you're insane. I get that a lot. As we do this, we're going to do the breakdown process the exact same way. Microsoft Word has a great feature. It's called the highlighter. It works perfectly for this scenario. You could even change the text color if you want. The old school way of doing this was with paper highlighters, so I tend to use the highlighter tool. I'm going to switch my highlighter to red. I'm going to highlight the name Steve. There it is, tagged, okay? I highlighted the character in red because that's what Singleton does. In his book, for wardrobe, you circle the element rather than color it with a highlighter. That means you could use a pencil or anything. In this case, Microsoft Word has the draw option, which you can actually use to draw a circle around it. It says, ain't no sound but the sound of his feet. As you can see in Tagger, I used a purple color, might be violet. In Singleton's book, you can see that sound effects and music are brown. So that's what we'll use in this particular case. We'll go back to our highlighter. We'll find our brown color, sound of his feet. There it is, in brown. And you can also change the text to white, which might make it a little easier to read after you've tagged it. I think you get the point here, but the idea is to make sure that you have all of your elements highlighted so that when you go to your breakdown sheet, which I'm going to get into in just a second, you just copy them straight over. So here I am in Excel. This is the exact form that I'm going to include in the link below. I will also include it for Google Sheets so that you should be able to use it no matter what. If you don't have Excel, don't worry about it. Google Drive is free. So you can use Sheets on there, do this exact same process. You'll have this exact same information. Because time is money, you want to be as descriptive as possible inside your sheet here so that people are not wasting time getting what they need. So that's essentially the process of breaking down. Now, it takes practice. Obviously, you're not going to get everything the very first time. My suggestion is that you always read a scene once through without making any marks, and then go back and read through it, because then you get a better picture inside your head of what's supposed to be in the scene, and then you can go through and mark it up a lot easier. Now, I don't know how many people are still using a typewriter. I don't want to disinclude you if you are, although I don't know how you're watching YouTube on a typewriter. It's not my business. And not to discredit doing anything on paper. I get it, some people like to do that. I personally don't do that anymore. You get yourself a good collection of colored markers. You want to have a variety of colors, at least as many as you see in the sheet. And I don't really recommend using Sharpies, although my technique was to underline, not to highlight. A lot of people use highlighters. If you have a variety of highlighter colors, you can just go right over the words. I tend to underline. It's just cleaner for me. It's part of my process. So once you're done with your breakdown, you're going to import all of that information into your scheduling program. And that's going to give you your schedule of how many days it's going to take to shoot. And you need that because to create an accurate budget, you have to know how many days you're going to be shooting. And the word budget gives you a pretty good idea of how important that is, especially if somebody else is paying the bill. So my advice to you is just to work on your script and get really good at the breakdown process. And then in a future video, I'll do one on scheduling where you can actually import your script into the scheduling software. Also, as I stated in the first video, I'm going to start talking to some other content creators, and we're going to get some information on them about their creative process. So look for those videos as well. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.